Podcast City Network.
What is up, beautiful people? Welcome to episode 174 of this Monday Night Kickoff show we like to call the Nest Podcast. I'm the people's champ, Brandon Brewer. The Zach Bill is joining me once again. Zach, what is up, my man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going. It's another Monday night, and we are about an hour away from kickoff of the biggest game of the entire season that has some serious playoff seeding ramifications. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Zach, I wanted to kick the show off, rightfully so, talking about the Detroit Lions and them securing their very first victory of the season. It's been a long time coming. You know, they've got brand new coach Dan Campbell in there in Detroit. This is Detroit's first win in 364 days. So it's been almost a full calendar year since the last time they've tasted any sort of victory. So good job, Detroit.
Yeah.
Finally did it. We are not going to have a winless team this year in the National Football League. Jared Goff showed exactly why the Lions wanted to trade for him. It only took them 13 weeks to show it. And Vikings, man, what's up with them?
Yeah, it's got to be tough to be a fan of the Vikings because, you know, you come into the week facing the Lions. You think it's basically a bye week. You're going to steamroll them. Does not go their way. And in fact, kind of like the Thanksgiving game that the Lions played in, it kind of came down to the wire there. Fairly interesting, I would say. Honestly, I definitely expected the Vikings to come away with the win. I figured that the Lions would just kind of figure out some way to screw it up there at the end, but that wasn't the case. It wasn't, you know, some notable win to talk about, but nonetheless, it is their first win of the year. And like you said, they don't have to be winless. They don't have to be an 0-1 team. So yeah,
They got that tie.
They did. Hats off to them. I know the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan need it for sure. They haven't had much to celebrate for quite a while, so I think they'll take anything they can get at this point.
Absolutely, and it's interesting to note that, you know, you said that they've had a lot of close calls, a lot of close games, and stuff like that. The Vikings are also in that same boat. The Vikings have had a lot of these very close games that have come down to the wire, and now they are officially 0-8 in making a stop on what became game-winning drives. Not a very good clutch defense, if you ask me.
Yeah, and now they're going to have some serious offensive issues because Adam Thielen got hurt in that game and Dalvin Cook got hurt in that game. It's obviously unclear whether or not it's going to be long-term or not, but that game banged up some of their top-level players, so that's going to be tough.
Yeah, we got JC coming. What's up, big dog? How you doing? How about them Steelers? The Steelers put on a bit of a show this week. They got a good big time win, and another one that I didn't see coming because old Big Ben decided he's hanging up the cleats, hanging up the pads at the end of the season. I thought that they were just gonna flutter out, but they've still got some fight left in them.
Yep, for sure.
It was a big win for us as New England Patriot fans because them beating the Baltimore Ravens is what catapulted the New England Patriots to be the number 1 seed. We'll get into more of that as we talk about the Bills here in a little bit. But before we get into all the football stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about baseball. You know, it's out of baseball season, and usually at this time of year, whenever we talk baseball, it's this guy got picked up by this team, this free agent signing happened, this trade happened. But right now we are in the midst of what's being called a lockout. And I know a lot of people probably don't know or aren't familiar with what a lockout even means. So I wanted to take some time and kind of explain both sides of the situation, and then we can give our thoughts about it. So what an MLB lockout really is simple. The owners said, hey, we're locking the doors to our facilities so that nobody can come in. Normally this time of year is for guys that are coming back off of surgery. They would be in the locker room, in the weight room or whatever, going through physical therapy, stuff like that. So they no longer can do that. They have to go to their own doctors, their own facilities outside of the team's area. Another use for their buildings would be for contract negotiations. This is 2021. We found ways around in-person meetings, so that can all be conducted via Zoom or whatever the case may be. So that's not really a big issue. What's really going to be the big issue here is if they get to spring training time frame and they still haven't come to any sort of agreement, then this lockout's going to be a major stick in the mud. And the reason that they went for this lockout is because the owners, they wanted to get 100% of the TV revenue. All the TV deals that come in, each team signs a deal with a local affiliate to broadcast all of their games. The owners want all the money from that deal, and then the players would get a cut of the gate, essentially. So that's significantly less because, as you know, baseball doesn't sell out every single night. You're not going to sell out a Tuesday afternoon game in the middle of the school year or whatever, or even in the middle of summer whenever people are at work. It's just not going to happen. So the players get a smaller cut, and they're like, wait a second, that's not cool. We want a little bit of that TV money too. So that's one of the sticking points. The owners offered, if they are able to keep that 100% salary from the TV deal, that they would play less games. They would only play 154 games, and they would agree to the universal DH, which is one of the things, or a couple of the things that players have wanted. They want a shortened season, which 154, that's like 8 games short of what they play anyway. Yeah. So that's like a week off. That's not much, but the universal DH is a big one. That's one that the players have unanimously said that they want, and it's something that is now officially on the table. The players want more than just the shorter season than the universal DH. However, they want to protect young guys that are coming up through the minor leagues. They want to protect them from having their contracts manipulated. What I mean by that is a lot of times owners will hold guys down in the minors until it's convenient for them to bring them up so that they can have an extra year of contractual control. Case in point, Randy Arozarena, this year's American League Rookie of the Year, a guy that a lot of people are familiar with because he played all the way through the World Series last year or the year before and set postseason records with the Tampa Bay Rays. He also came up and made his major league debut with the St. Louis Cardinals. Mm-hmm. We were making the joke that, here he is 6 years into his MLB career and he's Rookie of the Year. That's for a reason. Like, his contract was manipulated in such a way that he was still technically a rookie this year. That's what one of the things that the players union is really trying to fix, is so that these guys don't continue to get screwed. What that does is that it adjusts their free agency so that they're not free agent eligible for many, many more years, and they have to stay with that team until they get to a certain age. And then, of course, once you get to that certain age, you're not as productive as you could have been had you been able to sign a free agent deal elsewhere sooner and all that stuff. With that being said, the players also want free agency adjusted. Instead of it being 6 years of service plus 3 years of arbitration, they want it to be, if you're 29 and a half years old with 5 years of service time, you're free agent eligible. Or if you have 6 years of service time, no matter how old you are, you're free agent eligible. So they would cut out those arbitration years. The owners say that's absolutely not a talking point. They want to keep it as is because, of course, they want to keep a decade of control on these players. The players also want tanking to be addressed. They don't want franchises like the Baltimore Orioles, who have a salary of $40 million, to be able to operate in the same leagues as like the Yankees and the Red Sox, who have a lot higher salaries and have a lot more competitive teams. I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Max Scherzer is making more than some 2 or 3 teams' entire rosters.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to have that addressed so that there's a more competitive play with these smaller teams that aren't willing to go and get these huge free agent deals. And then the final thing that they want is the players do not want expanded playoffs. And that goes back into the whole TV deal, because if there's expanded playoffs, that means more teams are going to be able to make it to the playoffs without going and getting the better quality players. They're going to slide in there into that playoff spot, get that playoff TV money that they don't see any of. So there's a lot there that the players are not happy with. And this is something that's been kind of talked about and kind of brought up for a while now. When they had their COVID pause in their season, this was all brought up then. And we knew going into this offseason that this was going to be a huge, huge talking point. And here we are. We're officially locked out. And what are your thoughts about that, Zach?
You know, it was definitely expected, especially considering how the COVID year went. Of they basically locked out for a few months and then figured out their 60-game season and everything. And it really shows you the difference in ownership versus the rest of the world, to be completely honest, because a lot of people will say, I don't feel bad for these millionaire players because, again, they're making millions of dollars, which there is something to that. But at the same time, you've got to think this is a job for these guys. And it might be a very lucrative job. It might be a very, desirable job. It is their job, and it's their way of making money. And it just so happens to be that the market says that they earn X amount of dollars. Now, when you're talking about owners, those are obviously billionaires, every single one of them. And it's such a huge difference in how things operate. You talked about the TV deals. The owners want to keep that all for themselves. I think that's where a lot of teams make a lot of money. Even if a team is bad, they have their games on TV and diehard fans will watch, and they get ad revenue from that and everything like that. I really hate to see MLB lockout in a time like this, because they've already struggled with retaining fans, gaining new fans, having excitement across the league. And now we're just even in a worse position, because we could potentially have a loss of an entire season, a loss of X amount of playing time. And that's a terrible thing for a sport. We've talked about it before. If you remember the lockout of the 90s, a lot of people tuned out and a lot of people didn't really care. And then the steroid era guys kind of brought a lot of excitement back. What's going to bring people back to MLB if we lose a significant amount of time this year? I couldn't say. And it just sucks to see, especially from a fan standpoint who enjoys the game and loves to watch baseball no matter what. This is going to be a tough one, I think, because I don't think either side is going to necessarily want to budge. I think the owners have the power because they are the governing body per se of the teams. But I also think that the players have a lot of power. They have no product if there's no player on the field, and they have nothing to sell if there's not elite level talent playing the sport. So it's going to be very difficult to hash out. And I expect the worst here, but I hope for the best.
Yeah, you hit on something very, very compelling there at the end. Is the players do have leverage right now, whereas before, whenever it was the COVID pause in the season and all that stuff, they didn't have as much leverage because they were still under contract. Their CBA expired at the end of the World Series, so they are free to make a new deal. And if they don't make a new deal, then they don't play. And if they don't play, then the owners don't make money. They don't get TV deals if there's nothing to put on TV. So if the owners want their money, they're going to have to bend to some of these demands to make it work. Yeah. And I mean, that's where a negotiation comes into play. And that's why we're in this lockout period. A lockout is essentially a tactic that's being used to force negotiation. It's something that they're trying to say, hey, we know we're going to miss out on a ton of money if we don't come together on something, but we're willing to lock out and make it to where we have to come to an agreement on this.
Right.
I expect the deal to work out before any games of the 2022 season. Like you said, I don't think baseball can survive another big strike like what happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, if Major League Baseball does go into a strike, I do expect baseball to come back one day, but it'll be significantly different than the game that we know it as now.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Like if they do strike, I could definitely see something like they come out and it's like, okay, your pitcher has to pitch 2 innings no matter what. And it's every pitcher is just going to go out there and just throw the ball as hard as they can. And then the guys are just going to swing at everything. And you're going to have a home run derby every night.
Yeah.
Power versus power. It's going to be, I don't know. Like I could see it just being something that's kind of watered down for the purists, but amplified for the casual fans that just want to see dingers.
Yeah.
I would definitely think that the baseball that they use will be juiced so that you see a lot more home runs, a lot more offensive. And I don't think baseball really needs that. The game's exciting as is if you understand the game.
Yeah. I just think they do have an issue with the attention span of current fans or current people that would be fans. And I think that's something that they could address, but I don't think they should change the game like you're talking about. And I do think that's definitely a possibility if we do see a strike and then a comeback. I hope that there's an agreement here, but I do think the owners are going to have to eat some crow here and just give up a little bit more than they want. I definitely think there's going to have to be a restructuring to the contracts. That's a must, I think, for the players, a must have, because the owners have just been getting the sweet deal of this for years on end. I mean, if you look at any other sport, especially like NFL, where a lot of guys' careers are short, there's no way they could get away with this kind of thing. And I understand that a MLB player's career could be significantly longer because there's a lot less chance of injury and stuff like that. But you're talking about a guy's prime years pretty much are controlled by this team for 6 years, then 3 years of arbitration and stuff like that. I think that absolutely has to change. I could understand 3 to 5 years of control for the team that drafts them. But then after that, in my opinion, it's on to free agency. I think the arbitration needs to go away. I think that's just a way for owners to come up with excuses as to why they shouldn't have to pay a player as much as they're worth. And I do think that's one of the things that they're going to absolutely have to back off on.
Arbitration is a terrible process to go through as a player and as an organization and as a fan base altogether. I've been a baseball fan for many years and watched a lot of star players come up through the Red Sox organization and go through arbitration. Mookie Betts is one of the main ones that I remember seeing, like, man, they're kind of doing him dirty because here he is in 2018. We'll put it there, coming off of an MVP season where he was also a World Series champion and a Gold Glove. And they're going to put him up to arbitration because they're saying, well, you're not worth the money you think you're worth.
Right.
You're not as valuable as you say you are. And that leaves a sour taste in their mouth. If your team is saying you're not worth this amount, whether it's 15 million, whether it's 40 million, the team saying you're not worth it, it makes them want to go elsewhere.
Yep. And I completely agree. And Jack Flaherty went through arbitration recently with the Cardinals. And I mean, that's a guy who could be an ace on almost any squad. And the Cardinals, like you said about the Red Sox and Mookie Betts, they're trying to say you're not worth X amount of money. Then why am I the ace on your squad? Why am I the best pitcher in your clubhouse? Those two don't go together. And I think, like you said, that puts a bad taste in players' mouths. They immediately want to look elsewhere because if you don't value me, there's someone out there that does. And I think if that was completely taken out and it was, let's just say 5 years of club control, they can send you up, they can call you back down for those 5 years. And then once the 5 years is up, you're a free agent. You can give a guy a 1-2 year deal after the end of those 5 years, give him some money, And if he proves himself yet again, you can sign a mega contract after that if you want. Or if that guy is just so talented that he can get a mega deal right after that 5 years, then that's it. That's the case. And I think that can be handled on a player by player basis. And they don't need this arbitrary, just middle ground of people that decide whether or not you're worthy of the money that someone will pay you.
Yeah, baseball is very interesting in that regard. They make these guys sleep on couches and eat ramen noodles for years, and then all of a sudden they have $100 million like contract in front of them. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Brandon Mateer brings up a good question about Correa not being signed before the lockout period. That's a big one. You know, I see you commented on there as well, Zach, that you think that he wants a big payday, and that's true. With this lockout, do you think that hurts his chances of getting that big payday?
I think depending on what the results are, he probably won't get as much as he is hoping for. And I think that's why he held out. I'm sure he got tons and tons of offers that were suitable for him, but I think he was holding out for the max contract. I mean, you look at what guys like Corey Seager and Trey Turner and Javi Baez got, and I'm sure Carlos Correa thinks to himself, well, I'm better than all those guys. I have to get something better. And in a normal year, that probably would have happened. But in this kind of situation, I think the owners are going to come away from this with different eyes on how they view those type of long, giant contracts. And I don't think he'll get as much as he thought he would. He might from a team that is desperate for a spark like he can provide. I don't think the contract level is going to be as big as it was even a year ago or even this year, because a lot's going to change, I think. And I think a lot of owners are going to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to spend all that money on one player. I'm going to use that elsewhere because of whatever they have to give up. I think they're going to have a bitter sense about it. And I think they're going to not necessarily hold a grudge, but I think they're just going to operate differently because the owners have had to give up something pretty significant to themselves.
Well, the Astros did offer Correa 5-year, $160 million, which everyone scoffed at the time, saying like, oh, he's worth so much more than that. And the deal is kind of a slap in the face. Could that be about where it lands? You know, maybe with another team, maybe the Astros rescind that offer and they go elsewhere in their signings, because they can't sit around and wait forever either. They've got to fill that hole. They've got to operate on the assumption that he is going elsewhere, and they've got to fill that hole. So maybe he lands somewhere around that $160 million 5-year mark or whatever. It's crazy to me because Xander Bogaerts is a much better value in his contract that he signed for 6-year, $120 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you might see that. I mean, honestly, I think a 5-year contract is a smart move for a team. Obviously, the player wants the max contract that they can get, which I completely understand. You never know what's going to happen. You obviously want some guaranteed money whenever you can get it. But if you're an owner and you're the one, you know, basically taking money out of your revenue from owning this team and giving it to a player, I think a 5-year deal is perfect. These 10-year deals and stuff that you see certain guys get, I think those are super risky. You know, a guy could immediately slip off 6, 7, 8 years into his career. You never know. But that's just me.
They're super risky in free agency. Like when Albert Pujols signed his mega contract to go to the Angels, that was a big contract for an older player.
Mm-hmm.
These deals that guys like Tatis and Acuna and Randy Arozarena and all Wander Franco and all those guys, they're still so young. Basically, what the organizations are doing are just buying out their arbitration years.
Yeah.
They say, hey, you're good enough that we're going to give you $20 million for the next 10 years, and that's going to eat up all of your arbitration. So you're not going to be able to negotiate for $38 to $40 million 5 years from now. You
know what's weird about those deals with those young players is they have all this control, and you could essentially pay a guy the league minimum for those 6 years of his contract, and nothing's really stopping you from doing that. What makes them not do that? And I'm sure they want to appease to that player, because a guy like Tatis, you want him around for as long as you possibly can, which I get. But if I were an owner and if they're as greedy as we think they are, why wouldn't you just, at least for 3, 4, 5 years, league minimum? I mean, there's nothing saying that you can't do that.
Yeah, but the thing is if you let them go on for 3 or 4, 5 years and they're putting up MVP seasons, if they're consecutively getting gold gloves or silver sluggers, and they're setting themselves as elite, getting those all-star games, getting all of these accolades to themselves, that's driving up that price even more.
Yeah.
Whereas if you buy early, you got them locked in at 20 mil.
Yeah.
They're not going to hit you for 40 mil, 45 mil, as it gets bigger and bigger, as they get closer and closer to that arbitration and that free agent period, that price just keeps increasing. That's why you've got Carlos Correa right now wanting 5 years, 180, $200 million, whatever it is that he wants, because he suffered on that league minimum for 7-8 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, now that you mentioned it, if you take Tatis, for example, he obviously was a just spark immediately. And I guess that the Padres saw that, hey, he seems like an absolute stud of a player. We better lock him up while we can.
And that's the same reason that the Braves did that with Acuna, and the Rays are doing that with their 2 young rookies. And I imagine that a lot of these guys that are coming up that are once in a generation talents, they're going to start seeing stuff like that. Your everyday players probably not going to see that. They're probably going to keep riding out all the way through arbitration and stuff like that. If the Red Sox would have done that with Mookie Betts back when he was a young up-and-coming player in 2014 and locked him up for 10 years for $20 million a season, think of the savings that they would have had over that amount of time.
Yeah,
so
good point.
Let's move on. Let's talk about, we talked about the lockdown. I want to know who we think has their division locked up in the NFL. And we've got a bunch of division leaders right now. Some of them have a close second, and some of them are running away with that division. In the NFC East, the Dallas Cowboys are sitting at 8-4 at the top of that division, with the Washington football team in second place at 6-6, and the Eagles hot on their heels at 6-7. So the Cowboys have a little bit of a lead. Do they have enough firepower to withstand the last few weeks of the season and to clinch that NFC East?
I think because of the fact that they play in the NFC East, they do, but they are not playing great. They're definitely not playing like they were at the beginning of the season, where Dak was yet again showing us that he was a very talented player. They've had some struggles for sure. They had a lot of injuries a week or two ago. It's not looking as great as it once was, but I still think they have enough to get the job done and seal the deal there. I think it's someone like the Eagles could maybe give them a run for their money, but I just think they're going to end up falling short.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, with Jalen Hurts now being injured, Gardner Minshew filled in wonderfully for him, as Gardner Minshew typically does. But the Minshew magic doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
And we saw that in Jacksonville. We'll inevitably see that in Philly. I think you're right. I think the Dallas Cowboys have too much firepower to be held down in that NFC East. So I do think that they have their division pretty well on lock, and they should clinch within the next couple of weeks. So that's something that we'll have to hear about from all the Cowboy fans.
Yeah.
In the NFC West, I definitely think the Arizona Cardinals have that division on lock. The Cardinals are 10-2 right now. In second place is the Rams at 8-4. The Rams have seemingly fallen off quite a bit in recent weeks. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 games. The big additions of Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. haven't really had the impact that I think that they wanted. I think losing Robert Woods was probably the most impactful thing that's happened to the Rams. And I don't see them really being able to get over that loss. Cardinals, they're back to firing on all cylinders. They came out of their bye week. Now Kyler's back healthy and looking great. D-Hop was back playing. He still was limited on his snap count and didn't play for the whole game, but he did manage to get out there and catch a few balls, run a few routes. I'm sure going into next week, he'll have more practice under his belt, more conditioning. He'll be back to himself pretty soon and good to go. I think that all speaks well for the Cardinals, and they're going to be fine.
Yep, I 100% agree. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that the Rams were building themselves up, giving themselves even more firepower, and it was going to be quite a hotly contested little run there to see who was going to run away with that. And I think you're right. I think the Rams have basically crumbled almost. It's not, end of the world type scenarios, but those two signings that they did for themselves have not panned out. The Cardinals look as good as they have been. Kyler Murray doesn't seem to have missed a step. I think this is the Cardinals division easily. And I think it's a shock. I think the Rams could have and should have made this a much tighter division than it is. I really don't understand what's going on other than the additions that they added just aren't working. The chemistry has been all screwed up. You got to think the two guys that they signed are kind of divas per se. Obviously OBJ is definitely a diva. And I think that kind of brings a weird chemistry to a team that was already clicking. I mean, they already had plenty of weapons, offense and defense, but you had a couple guys who kind of mix things up, and clearly it does not work for the Rams.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting. You think about super teams, and that's what the Rams essentially were trying to build. Robert Woods going out, that definitely hurt that, but super teams usually take some time to gel and develop. They don't usually just have that chemistry at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took the Miami Heat a full season of playing together to get the chemistry between LeBron, D-Wade, and Chris Bosh before they were good and won a championship in Miami. So
right.
That first season that they were together, they were actually laughable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be something like that with the Rams. I think maybe next year they can figure everything out and run the table. But at least this year, it seems like the Cardinals
they can keep people.
That's true. Yeah, that's another good point. And maybe they do need to get rid of, say, a Von Miller or an OBJ. I don't think they necessarily needed them to begin with. And clearly they haven't done a whole hell of a lot. But like you said, maybe it takes some time to gel and to figure everything out and get used to everyone's tendencies and stuff like that. So you never know.
Yeah, I agree. Down in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Bucs pretty much have that one locked down. They're sitting at 9-3. Everyone else in the division is at 5-7. That's the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Saints, all with the same record. The big question that I have for the Bucs is, back when Antonio Brown signed with the Tampa Bay Bucs last season, Bruce Arians came out and said, "Hey, AB's kind of on a probationary period. If he screws up, if he messes up at all during this time, he is out. We're not keeping him around. We're not going to have the Antonio Clown show down here in Tampa Bay." Well,
it happened.
Does the forgery of COVID paperwork, is that considered messing up?
If they're actually going to be true to their word, then I would say yes, because I mean that's a pretty serious offense. And I mean, if the government wanted to, I'm sure they could press charges against him because that's falsifying document or whatever that might be. But we'll see. I don't think they need an Antonio Brown type character in Tampa to be successful. They've got plenty of other good wide receivers that they can use. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. They're going to have to keep him around. Did they have to keep him during this suspension? I think it's without pay, but I wonder if they could just cut him during this suspension if they wanted to.
That I'm not sure of, if they have to keep him for the duration of the suspension. It might be one of those things like you have to keep him, but you can only carry 52 men on your roster since you have a suspended player or something.
Right.
But per Fan Nation, the Buccaneers are considering cutting wide receiver Antonio Brown amid this scandal. So that would be something pretty significant to keep an eye on down the stretch, because Antonio Brown was very instrumental in the Bucs championship last year.
Oh yeah.
I know they still have tons of firepower with Gronk and Woods and Evan, or not Woods, but Godwin and Evans, and they've got a lot of weapons down there in Tampa Bay. But losing AB, who has basically been Pittsburgh AB this season,
right
prior to this, that would be a big one.
There's something to say about the chemistry between him and Tom Brady. I mean, for whatever reason, Tom Brady loves Antonio Brown, and that might mess with Tom's ability to move the ball how he wants to and throw to who he wants to with whatever certain route. So if they do end up getting rid of him, it might be a bigger issue than we think, or it might just be, a non-issue, and he might just slot someone else into that route that AB was supposed to run, or who knows. But yet again, a guy with a ton of talent just can't keep it together.
Well, as a guy that has Chris Godwin on his fantasy football roster, I'm definitely glad that Antonio Brown wasn't there to take any targets away, because I definitely like seeing 15 receptions in one game.
Yeah.
That was pretty huge. Let's go over to the AFC, where we have the AFC South with the Tennessee Titans still sitting at the top of the heap there at 8-4, but hot on their heels are the Indianapolis Colts at 7-6. This is one that I don't think is at all locked up. The rest of the division is terrible with the Texans and the Jags. So it's really the two team race. Both of these teams should make the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see which one comes out as the division champ and which one ends up as a wild card.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the Colts have a big chance to take this from the Titans. Obviously, we know that the Titans are without their star running back. The Colts have a star running back who's basically not a star yet. Carson Wentz seems to be doing good enough. And I do think that's a lot to do with how well their running back is playing. I think they're going to do enough to at least keep up with the Titans. And I think this is their division to kind of surprise us and get that number one spot, because I think if you pay attention, the Titans are falling apart here. We kind of thought that Tannehill would be able to throw a lot more and make it a more passing offense without Derrick Henry, and he wouldn't have to share the ball with Derrick Henry. Apparently he's not able to do that, and apparently he absolutely needed Derrick Henry, which makes sense if you think about it, but I did not think it would go this poorly for them. And it just almost just crumbled. And I think this is the opportunity for the Colts to lock this up for themselves. Whether they do that or not is yet to be determined, but they can do it. Absolutely.
I think you're spot on. I think with Derrick Henry, I think the Titans can run away with this division, because Derrick Henry in the backfield makes Tannehill a viable weapon at quarterback. Without Derrick Henry, we're getting the Miami Dolphins version of Ryan Tannehill, and why they were willing to move on from him, because he's not able to carry the weight of the entire team on his shoulders. He needs the broad shoulders and the long ponytail of Derrick Henry to ride behind. And without that, he doesn't have his workhorse. We did say whenever Henry went down that we expected the Titans to start to drop in the rankings. I didn't expect it to be, I guess, as meteoric of a fall, because they are definitely plummeting down without him, because they can't get the offense going.
Yeah.
Julio Brown being out, that's probably a big deal. Not having Jonnu Smith back this season, probably a big deal. AJ Brown has been injured for stretches of the season. That's been a big deal to him. So they have been injury plagued, but I don't think the Tennessee Titans have what it takes to hold on to that division. I think you're right. The Indianapolis Colts probably will race past them, just like Jonathan Taylor raced past Derrick Henry for the league's leading rusher.
Yeah. We talked about MVPs. What was it, last week? The week before?
Yeah, last week, yeah.
Derrick Henry is by and large the MVP of the Tennessee Titans.
It's I wish voters would consider stuff like that. Like, what is the true impact of the player? Can they win without him? And that was the point that I was making with Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Is, he's good, but the team was still doing pretty well without him. Derrick Henry the team sucks without him.
Yeah, 100%. I think that we talk about Super Bowl contention whenever Derrick Henry is on the field because he's rushing leader. He's doing all this. He's doing all that. He's unstoppable. When he's not on the field, this team can't even win their division.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah.
Things are also pretty hot over in the AFC North because the Baltimore Ravens, who just dropped out of that first place seed, are sitting at 8-4 right now. And the second place Bengals, can't believe I said the second place Bengals, are hot on their heels at 7-5. This is a team that's exciting to watch. I like watching them. I think they have a little bit more developing to do, but they're going to be good for several years. And then third place, sneaky Steelers sitting there at 6-5-1. They could come up. They could make a run at it. And the Browns, last place at 6-6, still aren't out of it.
Yeah.
So this AFC North, it's anybody's ball game. But if I had to put money on anybody, I would say that it would probably be the Ravens, even though they've looked not that great lately.
Yeah, I think by default the Ravens are probably gonna win this division, and I don't think it'll be by much. I think, like you said, at the end of the season, I think this division will be very tight. And I think if the Browns could have been a little bit better, I don't know what the issue was there. I've heard a lot of people say that Baker Mayfield has just not had a great year, but I think this could have been their year to win that division. That's not the case. So I think by default, we're kind of left with the Ravens, and the Bengals, like you said, just can't get there just yet. They need a little bit more. They're very close. The Steelers, I think their future is very up in the air because Big Ben is obviously leaving soon, and I do not think they have what it takes to win that division this year. The Ravens can be beaten, though. I was listening to the radio this morning, and somebody brought up a great point that if you go back and look at the teams that were able to capitalize against the Ravens, a lot of them blitzed Lamar Jackson over and over and over and over, and he could beat you every now and then, but I think that's a key to shutting him down. You make him work and you make him run constantly. He can't do it all night. And that's obviously we've seen that's their bread and butter is the ball moves through Lamar Jackson, and then whatever happens after that happens. But it's basically up to him to get that offense rolling. And if you can shut him down, if you can stuff him, you can beat the Ravens.
Yeah, no, I agree. They are beatable. And if the Bengals do happen to mess around and win that division, I wouldn't be sad about it at all. I enjoy watching Joe Burrow go back and sling the ball all over the field because that is a fun offense to watch.
Yeah, it's great.
I think their defense is really lacking, though, and that's where they get beat.
Yeah.
In the West, AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs have reclaimed what a lot of people thought was rightfully theirs from the onset of the season, sitting at first place at 8-4 now. They've rattled off, I believe it's 5 consecutive wins. Second place Chargers are sitting there at 7-5, and the third place Raiders still not out of it at 6-6. This is another division that is pretty hotly contested, but I do ultimately think the Chiefs will be able to hold off and win, mainly because their defense has come around and is looking pretty good.
Yeah, they've definitely figured a lot of stuff out. Last night's game was a bit of a head scratcher, seeing as how they really didn't do that great against the Broncos, but that's neither here nor there. They did get the dub, and I think they have figured out several things that they 100% absolutely needed to figure out. They're back to being dangerous. I don't think they're the steamrolling team of a couple of years ago, but I do ultimately think that they're going to win their division. It sucks to see the Chargers not come out a little bit stronger than we thought they were, and they did have a great start to the season, but I don't know what it is. For whatever reason, they just weren't able to hold off the Chiefs for that number 1 spot. But again, they're having a good season, all things considered.
Like the Bengals, I think they're close. They're just not quite there.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of talent out there. They've got Herbert. Keenan Allen is fantastic. Mike Williams is a good too. Austin Eckler is a fantastic running back, probably one of the top 5 backs in the league now. And, they have it together. They have a pretty decent defense. I think a few more pieces on that defense defensive side would really do them wonders.
100%.
So I think they're good. I think that we'll see the Los Angeles Chargers for years to come. And then in the AFC East, the New England Patriots are sitting in first place. In second place, the Bills. They're neck and neck. The Patriots 8-4, the Bills at 7-4. And third place, the Dolphins are hanging around at 6-7. Tonight's Monday Night Football game has huge playoff implications because of the fact that it's the New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. This is their first of 2 meetings on the season. And I was looking at the projections. If the Patriots win, they remain number 1 in the AFC as far as seeding is concerned, and the Bills drop to 7th.
That's insane.
If the Bills win, then the Bills go up to 2 and the Patriots drop to 5. So there's a pretty big swing no matter who wins as far as playoff seeding is concerned.
Yep.
It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very, very good game, I hope. And I was seeing all the reports that it is very snowy in Buffalo. And usually whenever the games are snowy and windy, the team with the better running attack has the advantage. And I think that the Patriots with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris have a much better running attack than what the Bills have been able to show us.
Yeah, 1,000% on that one. That's what we've been harping on for issues that the Bills have for quite a while now, is that they need a better running game. I'll be very interested to see how Mac Jones does in basically his first game that is very meaningful. I think he has all the showings of a player that can take that kind of pressure and thrive off of it. But I think time will tell. Obviously, we're going to see tonight what happens. Super interesting. This is going to be a crazy game with a lot of implications this early on in the season. Obviously, we don't have too much longer in the season, but this is a huge game to have at this point.
Yeah, this is the capstone on week 13 and moving into, we only have about 4 more weeks of regular season football after this. So it is getting late in the season, and this is a pretty huge game.
Yeah.
Earlier on in the season, they hyped up and gave so much attention to Tom Brady returning to Foxborough, and they were saying, oh, it's such a huge game and da-da-da. And it was a big game at the time, but this game is bigger.
Oh, yeah.
This game means more in the overall story of the season. Tom Brady returning to Foxborough was only significant to a certain amount of people.
Yeah.
This impacts the entire league.
I completely agree. That was more of a personal story and more of a fan base affected story, but I think this has implications for playoff positions and bye weeks and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, this is huge.
So who wins? What are the keys for victory?
I think the Patriots ultimately come up with it. I don't know what's going on other than the running game woes with the Bills. I really couldn't say, but they've just kind of lost something that they had for the past couple of years. And I don't know what it is. I think Josh Allen is still a good player, but we've said it before. He needs a little bit more help. He's got some pieces that work, but it's just not enough to be one of those top contending teams. I think that the Patriots have a great defense that I think they can fairly easily contend with that Bills offense, especially if it's like you said, and it is a run heavy game. I think that's a pretty simple game plan for the Patriots to beat the Bills. And like he's done all year, Mac Jones doesn't have to go out there and be a gunslinger. He can be a game manager. He can hit his checkdowns. You don't need to do a whole lot. And I think the big question mark is the Bills defense for real? Can they show up and stomp the Patriots offense? I think there's a question mark there too, because for a couple of years there, the Bills had a very stout defense, and I don't know what their issue is as a whole, but it doesn't seem like they are the bigger team anymore in the AFC. I mean, they're for a while now. They were a top dog, and a lot of people, us included, thought that they had at least the division locked up maybe even the whole entire conference, but I think a lot of that has changed.
Maybe paying Josh Allen $258 million over 6 years took a big impact on the defensive side of the ball in terms of guys that they were able to bring back.
Yeah, and that's something we always harp on is the second you pay one guy a crap ton of money, you're taking it out of other positions and you're going to have holes somewhere. You can't pay everybody.
Ryan hit the nail on the head. They don't have that solid running back to have that driving offense. They need the home run. And if you take that home run away, what do they have?
Sounds like somebody's a baseball fan. I like that.
Yeah, I like the analogy there. We're running a little low on time, Zach, so let's go ahead and move into our Week 13 fantasy studs and duds. This is a reoccurring segment every week during the NFL season, and I'm going to kick it off with my stud quarterback of the week as Kyler Murray. Kyler dropped 30.82 points. He only had 123 yards passing, which I thought was absolutely bizarre. But he added 59 yards rushing and 4 total touchdowns, which really drove up that point total in fantasy.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great pick. That was also my pick. I think he was the top scoring quarterback of the week. One thing to note that was interesting, and it looks like Adam in our league played him. Taysom Hill had 20 points along with 4 interceptions. So he was able to get 20 points with not a great offensive game. I mean, he was basically a running back out there. He was still able to get 20 points. So that was pretty interesting. But I think Kyler Murray runs away with it on this one. He came back from his injury and from the bye week and looks like his former self. Throwing 4 touchdowns in his first game back was huge. So yeah, he's definitely the stud of the week for quarterbacks.
He had 4 total touchdowns. He only threw 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
He ran for the other 2.
Nice.
But Taysom Hill had the Lamar Jackson stat line.
Yeah, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. That's a crazy stat for a quarterback.
What about your dud?
For dud, I have Patrick Mahomes. And that game was so weird. They won 22-9. But I would just expect so much more from that offense.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce were just a non-issue in that game. They just weren't able to get going. And Patrick Mahomes came up with 12.56 points. He did have a rushing touchdown through 1 interception and got 184 yards. I expect a lot more out of him against a division opponent like that. And maybe that is the issue that prevented them from being so successful, is that the Broncos kind of know them a little bit better than other teams. But still, for a team that everyone's always touting as Super Bowl bound, I would think he'd have a little bit more success than that. Yeah,
no, I agree. And that's a good pick. Patrick Mahomes is not looking like he wants to be MVP this year.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of performances just like that, to where he didn't really go out there and shine. Another guy that was early on in the MVP conversation that has done that same kind of a stat line quite a bit recently is Dak Prescott, and he's my dud of the week. He had 11.22 points, 238 yards passing, -3 yards rushing, which I always thought that was considered a sack, but
yeah.
what do I know? He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception, and I put in my notes, no MVP. I think this game sealed the deal on all MVP conversation for Dak.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's interesting because I maybe would have given him a pass on those weeks whenever he didn't have the weapons that he's used to because they were injured. But Amari Cooper was back this week. He may have been limited in time or whatever, but yeah, this is not MVP caliber stats. And I mean, let's face it, they play in an easy division. They should be able to do a little bit more than what he put out in the field.
Ryan Gaskins is saying TB12 is the MVP. I've got either him or Aaron Rodgers as the 2 front runners.
Yep, agreed.
What about your running back stud?
Stud, I go with Chicago Bears David Montgomery, who a guy we don't hardly ever talk about because he's usually fairly mediocre. This week he balled out. He had 28 points, 1 touchdown and 90 yards. Pretty significant week for this guy, especially considering what team he plays for. They usually don't have great offensive performances, and he was able to put up quite a bit of points this week.
Yeah, that's a good call. I also had David Montgomery written down. The catches really sealed the deal for him.
Yeah.
He had 8 catches for 51 yards. Getting in the end zone is also huge anytime. But I want to also showcase Alexander Madison. This dude for the Minnesota Vikings. We talked about him in the open of our show, how they kind of dropped the ball a little bit. He was actually consistent with 21.4 points. This guy's filled in for Dalvin Cook, who has been injured and all that stuff. He touched the ball 22 times for 90 yards and a touchdown. He also caught all 3 of the passes that were targeted to him for 34 more yards. Dude balled out. He was a consistent weapon used by Kirk Cousins. They just fell short.
Yeah. There's a consistent trend going on throughout the running backs of the league, and that's if you can put yourself in the passing game, you're skyrocketing your ability to affect that offense. And I mean, obviously fantasy points and obviously in the real life games, you're so much more valuable if you can catch passes and be a threat and not just run the ball over and over and over. And that's all you really bring to the table. And I think you're just going to see more and more of that as the years go on. These guys that are dual threats are insanely valuable.
Yeah, well, we're speaking of value. Somebody who definitely wasn't worth the value that they signed for is my running back dud of the week, and that's Zeke Elliott. I guess I'm beating up on the Dallas Cowboys a little bit, but Zeke posted 6.7 points in fantasy. He only had 45 yards rushing on 13 carries. He had 2 catches for 2 yards. That's it. Tony Pollard has definitely looked like the best back there in Dallas. Whether the Cowboy fans want to admit it or not, Zeke is not the man.
Yeah, I was going to say, has Tony Pollard eclipsed Zeke as RB1 yet? I don't know what else he has to do.
If I'm the Dallas Cowboys, he has, but they still use him as a kick returner. They still use him in multiple facets of the game. So maybe that's what's keeping him from being the true RB1 is the fact that he's utilized so many other places. But in my opinion, he is the more dominant back. And if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I'm probably looking to try to move Zeke at the end of the season.
Yeah, talk about a guy who is just completely not worth their contract. My bust this week at running back is going to be Joe Mixon, a guy who the week before stole all the limelight of that Bengals offense. This week, not so much. Came up with 9.4 points. He did have a fumble, which hurts. He had 1 touchdown and went for 54 yards. Not a big week for him, obviously. And I think that's what we've been saying about the Bengals and teams like that have stars sprinkled all around. One guy inevitably is just going to come up short, and this week that was Joe Mixon.
Ryan saying don't pay running backs. I know that's something that we've talked about on here, and that's something that the guys over at the Sportzilla podcast talk about a lot. I feel like we need to make a shirt or something that just says that.
Yeah,
don't pay running backs. I think that it writes itself, really.
Yeah.
My stud wide receiver for the week is Chris Godwin. I mentioned him earlier. 30.2 points in fantasy, 15 receptions for 143 yards. He set the Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise record for catches in a game.
Oh, wow.
So anytime you set a franchise record, you get to be a stud of the week.
Hey, there you go. My stud this week is going to be Justin Jefferson. He posted 35 points. That's a great day for a wide receiver. 1 touchdown, 182 yards on 11 receptions for him. Great day for him. He, I think, capitalized on Adam Thielen going down with an injury and became Kirk Cousins' #1 target, and he thrived on that.
I'm laughing because you picked Justin Jefferson, a Viking. I picked Alexander Madison, a Viking, and they inevitably lost to the Detroit Lions, of all people. But
God.
in fantasy football, we don't care how the team performs. We care about individual performances. So just goes to show this isn't on the offense.
Yeah, 100%.
The Minnesota Vikings offense did what they were expected to do. It's that defense that dropped the ball and specifically didn't protect the end zone on that final play of the game when they dropped 8 people to the back of the end zone and let them just walk into the front of the end zone and catch the pass.
Yep.
My wide receiver dud of the week isn't actually a wide receiver. He's a tight end, but it's Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce posted 5.7 points in fantasy, which is abysmal for him. He only had 3 catches for 27 yards, but he was targeted 8 times. Now, I've talked about it before. Target is kind of a weird stat because you could be targeted, but the ball was 10 yards over your head. So it doesn't always speak to how well that player played, but he only had 3 catches for 27 yards. He was pretty much a non-factor in the game.
Yeah, and that sucks for the number 1 tight end in the game. I mean, people picked him probably before they even started picking their wide receivers because he's such an asset on fantasy football. Just wasn't able to be involved this week.
Oh, he was picked after the bulk of the running backs in a lot of fantasy football leagues.
Yeah, that's a huge spot to be, especially as a tight end. My dud this week is going to be Devontae Smith. Phillies. Eagles are playing the Jets, and that's just a given game. And they did go on to win 33-18, but for whatever reason, I guess Gardner Minshew just didn't want to throw his way or whatever. But Smith ended up with 3.5 points, only 2 receptions for 15 yards. We're talking about a former Heisman winner. This guy should have been more of a playmaker in this game. No one's ever really said that the Jets have a great secondary, so he just was kind of left out of the win for this game. And for anyone who started him, I feel bad for you.
Yeah, that sucks. Well, that wraps up that. All in all, I had a pretty good week in fantasy. Zach, I know you should have started Dallas Goedert because he went off as far as the tight end is concerned. But you left him on your bench and had 28 points sitting there.
Yeah, rough day. And Thielen got hurt. That sucked. Kenyon Drake got hurt. Sucked. Tyreek Hill was left out of the game. It was a bad week for me.
Let's clear the bases a little bit. We haven't done that in a while. Jake Paul now set to fight Tyron Woodley for the second time on December 18th after Tommy Fury backed out for undisclosed medical reasons. I guess he was saying that he was coughing and having trouble breathing. And then later they said that he had some broken ribs. So who knows what's really going on there. He also faked his mom being sick to get out of going to a press conference. So it seems like the Fury family has kind of been a little bit dodgy with answering some questions about this. So, but we get to see Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley 2. The first fight was a pretty good fight, all things considered. Are you excited for a rematch?
I'll tune in, but I think these fights with the Paul brothers they're more like watching WWE than anything. It seems like I don't know if it's true or not, but it just feels like there's a predetermined outcome. And I think that's the reason that they pick these guys. They're not going after top boxing talent. They're going after guys who are washed up and past their prime and are honestly looking to make a paycheck. And that's why they sign up to fight these guys. I think the fights themselves can be entertaining. And I think we'd all love to see Tyron Woodley win, but I just don't think it'll happen. I don't think that's in the cards. And I think that's why they fight these guys, is because they know they can win. It's just, it's annoying to watch, but it's also entertaining at the same time, if that makes any sense. It's just, I don't know. It's all a dog and pony show, it seems like.
Yeah, I get your point. But I do think that Jake Paul's for real. I think he's dedicated his life to becoming a boxing talent. What a lot of people don't realize is he's fighting the first 4 or 5 fights of his career on a pay-per-view stage.
Mhm.
This is something we don't typically see from fighters.
Yeah.
Normally they fight in gymnasiums with 12 people watching for
Yeah.
their first few professional fights, and then once they win those, then they get thrown into a bigger fight. He was signed up and was ready to fight Tommy Fury, a legit boxer.
Mhm.
Tommy Fury backed out. He scrambled last minute to find a replacement just so that he could keep the pay-per-view date. This will be his third fight of 2021. He's been pretty active as a fighter.
Right.
I mean, he's doing everything he can to further his career.
Right. I think what happened was they started this boxing thing as a way to make quick money off the pay-per-views and to get people to pay attention to them. And then they realized I'm actually kind of good at this and I can kind of do it. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And I think it's just going to take some time and some fights that are definitive against legit boxers, like you said, for guys like me to be convinced. I don't hate the guys. I don't really care what they do, but it's just weird. It all seems weird to me. You know, a guy like Logan Paul fighting Floyd Mayweather when, I mean, let's face it, Floyd had no chance in that fight. I mean, it's all just a weird show, it feels like. And I do think in Jake's case, he has a bit more time and ability to make himself an actual boxer. But signing up a fight with Tyron Woodley again, it's just like, really, come on. We've been through this. I get it. I think the allure isn't there. And I do want to see him fight legit fighters. And, you know, if guys back out, that's not his fault. So it is what it is at this point. But yeah, I'd love to see him fight some actual boxers and excel. And if he does that, then I have no room to talk.
And, you know, I'm on team Jake Paul. I think that he is better than Logan Paul as far as a boxing personality is concerned. And I think that he actually has the potential to make a legit run at being a boxer. Frank Gore also is fighting on the undercard for that pay-per-view. So that'll be fun to watch.
Does that guy not have enough CTE?
I guess not.
Jeez.
Before we go, we got one question rolling in from Harry Wolf over here. Should I be worrying about James Robinson? James Robinson, running back for the Jacksonville Jags. He made a trade for Jamar Chase and Javonte Williams, I'm assuming, and for James Robinson and Deontay and Michael Carter. I'm in the playoffs and the league is PPR. He's regretting it a little. Robinson lost a fumble this week and then was subsequently benched for it. That's kind of an Urban Meyer thing. You drop the ball, you're going to sit the bench. I didn't think that it would be for as long as he did. I figured it would just be for maybe the next possession or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they did go with Carlos Hyde for the majority of the game after that. I think Robinson should be back next week, maybe giving him that week off, refocus, decide that he doesn't want to be on the bench anymore. He'll come out ready to go. Prior to that, he had been averaging about 12 points a game or so. So that's not bad out of him. I know it's not the bust that he, or the boom that he was earlier in the season when he was rocking 20-point games, but you traded for a guy that's on the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's a team that doesn't really score a lot. So it's kind of hard to evaluate in that regard.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I have him on my fantasy team as well. He's been decent, I'd say. You're not going to get great games out of these players that play on these crappy teams like the Jags, the Lions, the Jets. It's not going to happen. They might have a breakout game every once in a while, but consistently, like Brandon said, he's going to get 10 to 15 points. On a big game, he's going to get 20, 25 maybe, but I think he'll come back. I don't think Carlos Hyde is the answer there for them at running back. They do have a good player and a younger player that can actually play effectively. And I think this was an Urban Meyer tactic to try to drive home the point. I would.
Good news for fantasy owners. Next week, they play at Tennessee. And then for week 15, which should be the first week in most leagues' playoffs, they play against Houston. And then week 16, they play against the New York Jets. So you do have some softer defenses coming up, but championship week 17, they do play at New England against the Patriots D. So that will be a tough game for him.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't rely on this guy to win you the playoffs and do anything like that. But I think if you don't have solid running backs already, he's a fine place to put in at a flex, especially for a good matchup. I think he'll do decently, but I don't think he's going to blow the cover off. So
yeah, I agree. Well, Zach, it's almost time for kickoff. So let's get off here, get a beer in hand, and get comfy on the couch so that we can watch the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Let us know in the comments who you think is going to win that game, and we'll see who's right. Zach and I both think that it will be the New England Patriots ultimately winning this game and taking control of the AFC for the rest of the season. So that's that. We appreciate everybody that's been watching. Thank you for all the comments and all the people that have shared the episode out and all that good stuff. We love you and we appreciate you, and we will see you back here next week. We out.